Everyone, let's begin with a question that has echoed through human hearts for thousands of years. What does the voice of God sound like? Not in the thunder, not in the whirlwind, not always in words. Often it's a whisper, a signal beneath the noise, and yet it is always there broadcasting, waiting for us to tune in. But in order to hear that voice clearly, we have to do something radical. We must quiet everything else. Let's start with the science. Your brain is an electrical field of thought and potential. Every time you think a thought, you're creating a frequency. Every belief, every emotion, every habit of perception is sending out a signal and drawing one back to you. Most people are trying to hear something divine, while tuned to the wrong frequency. Imagine trying to pick up a symphony on a static-filled AM radio channel. It's not that the music isn't playing, it's that you haven't trained your nervous system to receive it. So, how do we hear God's voice? First, we must understand, God speaks through silence. When the analytical mind settles, when the constant inner commentary fades, what's left? Presence, awareness, that still, conscious intelligence that's been with you all along. You don't create it, you don't force it, you align with it. It begins by slowing the brain waves, moving from the frantic beta state of survival into the alpha state of reflection, and eventually into theta, the realm where the subconscious becomes porous and the divine can flow in. In that space, intuition sharpens. You no longer just think about God, you feel God, and that feeling becomes a conversation. But this isn't about religion, it's about resonance. The voice of God is not bound to tradition or text. It is an intelligence that animates all life. It is the loving field of consciousness that surrounds you, fills you, and speaks to you through synchronicities, inspiration, dreams, and inner knowing. So, here's the process. Enter the stillness, whether through meditation, breathwork, or focused attention. Step outside the noise. You must become no one, going nowhere, doing nothing. You must step into now. Shift your identity, move from the limited self, the personality built on past memories, to the eternal self, which is awareness itself. God doesn't speak to the mask. God speaks to the truth within you. Tune your frequency, love, gratitude, compassion. These are high, vibrational states. When you dwell in them, you become a match for divine intelligence. You don't chase the voice, you become quiet enough for it to find you. Listen beyond the ears. God's voice is not always audible. Sometimes it's a pull in your heart, a sudden idea that feels like home. A peace that defies logic. You'll know it not because it shouts, but because it resonates so deeply that your soul says, yes, this is real, and finally, trust it. Don't wait for a lightning bolt. Don't expect it to come in one perfect sentence. It may come as a shift in perspective, a release of fear, a deeper breath. When it does, act on it, align with it, embody it. You see, the ultimate goal isn't just to hear God's voice. It's to become the vessel through which it speaks. When you do that, you don't just find clarity, you become it. In our modern world, silence is rare. We're surrounded by constant stimulation, phones buzzing, notifications flashing, voices competing for our attention. This external noise often mirrors the internal chatter within our minds, looping thoughts, worries, memories, and projections. In the midst of this chaos, we search for divine guidance, longing to hear the voice of God. But here's the paradox. The more we chase after it in noise, the more elusive it becomes. The truth is profound and simple. God speaks through silence, not noise. When we speak of silence, we don't just mean the absence of sound. True silence is the stillness of being, a state where the thinking mind surrenders and awareness takes its place. It's in this space of internal quiet that the subtle voice of divine intelligence begins to emerge. Not because it wasn't there before, but because now we can finally perceive it. The signal was always broadcasting. Our inner static just drowned it out. In silence, the body relaxes, the brain shifts from beta to alpha, and consciousness begins to expand. This isn't passive or empty. It's deeply alive. It's the fertile space where wisdom arises, where intuition activates, and where the deepest truths are whispered into the soul. Most people have never truly experienced this level of stillness because they've never been taught how to stop identifying with their thoughts. But in those rare moments, perhaps while meditating, walking in nature, or simply being present, the inner noise fades and something else begins to speak. It's not always a voice, it might be a knowing, a sense, a felt presence, but it is unmistakably real, and it only emerges when we become quiet enough to receive it. This is the spiritual technology of silence. It opens the channel between the self and the source. Every thought we think is not just a mental event, it's an energetic signal. The human brain generates electrical impulses that influence the electromagnetic field of the body. This means our thoughts aren't confined to the space inside our heads. They radiate beyond us, broadcasting into the quantum field that surrounds everything. When we think a thought, especially one charged with strong emotion, we are emitting a frequency into the field. And like any signal, it attracts a corresponding response. This is not metaphor. It's physics and neurobiology working together. Most people think unconsciously, recycling the same patterns of fear, doubt, stress, and limitation. These repeated thought loops condition the brain and body to stay in survival mode, creating a low-frequency broadcast into the field. The result, they continue to draw in experiences that match those signals. They're trying to connect with divine intelligence while projecting fear-based static. It's like trying to tune into a spiritual broadcast with a broken antenna. On the other hand, when we become conscious of our thoughts and start to choose them intentionally, we begin to change our frequency. A thought of gratitude, love, or compassion has a higher vibrational signature than one of fear or judgment. When we hold those elevated thoughts consistently, we shift the electromagnetic signature of our being. The field responds because it always responds. It's a mirror, not a judge. If we want to hear something higher, clearer, more divine, we must think in alignment with that frequency. That means recognizing the creative power of thought, not just as a mental habit, but as a spiritual instrument. Our thinking is not passive, it's participatory. The thoughts we choose are the signals we send, and those signals determine what kind of guidance, clarity, and connection we're able to receive. Stillness is not a passive state, it is a powerful portal. In a world that celebrates constant movement, relentless productivity, and mental busyness, the value of stillness is often overlooked or misunderstood. But if you want to hear the voice of divine intelligence, inner stillness is non-negotiable. It is the condition in which the noise of the ego quiets down, the distractions fall away, and your awareness begins to expand beyond the five senses. When the mind becomes still, it no longer grasps or resists. It simply observes, and in that observation a deeper presence begins to arise, one that was always there beneath the surface of your thinking. The act of entering stillness means withdrawing your attention from the external world and redirecting it inward. The senses, which are normally trained to monitor your environment, begin to relax. The energy you've scattered outward through attention to people, problems, and outcomes slowly returns to you. This reclamation of awareness is powerful. It consolidates your energy and places you in a receptive state. You're no longer leaking presence into the past or future. You're here, awake, available. In this stillness, time softens. The thinking mind, which is always tied to chronology and control, loosens its grip. You stop trying to make things happen and instead begin to notice what already is asterisk. It's within this spacious awareness that the whisper of divine guidance emerges, not because you chased it, but because you made room for it. The more you practice stillness, the more natural it becomes. The brainwave patterns begin to shift, the body enters coherence, the inner world becomes organized, and the external world starts to reflect that harmony. You don't have to force clarity to arrive. You create the environment where it naturally appears. The human brain operates on electrical activity that can be measured in distinct wave patterns. each corresponding to different states of consciousness. Most people live predominantly in a beta state, alert, analytical, and often stressed. While necessary for daily functioning, this state is dominated by survival mechanisms, mental chatter, and over-identification with the external world. In this heightened state of activity, it becomes nearly impossible to perceive anything subtle, especially something as refined as divine guidance. To access deeper spiritual perception, we must learn to slow these brainwave patterns down. When the brain shifts into alpha, the door between the conscious and subconscious mind begins to open. This is the state associated with relaxation, creativity, and heightened imagination. It's the threshold state where you begin to disconnect from the outside world and tune into the inner one. From there, with practice, you can drop even deeper into theta, a brainwave state linked with dreaming, deep meditation, and the edge of sleep. This is where profound intuition, insight, and connection with the non-physical can occur. It is within theta that people often report hearing, sensing, or receiving knowledge that feels divine in origin. These slower states allow the analytical mind to quiet, making space for an expanded field of awareness. You are no longer reacting from conditioned programs, you are perceiving from presence. This shift in brainwave activity changes the body's chemistry, bringing coherence to the heart and nervous system. The entire organism becomes more receptive, more sensitive to frequency, and more attuned to subtle shifts in energy and perception. Hearing the voice of God isn't about effort, it's about altering your internal state so that you become compatible with the frequency of that voice. The deeper the brain slows down, the more access you have to the intelligence that lies beyond thought. Identity is often thought of as fixed, shaped by our name, history, personality, roles, and beliefs. But these are constructs of memory, accumulated through experience and reinforced by habit. The voice of God does not speak to the constructed self that is tethered to past wounds, social conditioning, and emotional reactivity. That version of identity, rooted in ego and separation, is a barrier to divine connection. To hear something higher, something sacred, there must be a shift in identity, from who you think you are to what you truly are. This shift is not about losing yourself. It's about remembering your essence. At your core, beyond the roles and stories, you are awareness itself. Consciousness observing thought, feeling, and sensation. This pure awareness is timeless, formless, and deeply connected to the intelligence of the universe. When you begin to identify with this deeper layer of self, you step out of the noise of the conditioned mind and into a space of profound receptivity. You become the listener rather than the narrator. In this space, the divine doesn't need to compete with your thoughts. It can simply speak. To shift your identity means learning how to let go of the narrative that you are only the body, the job, the struggle, or the past. It means moving from the personality into presence. This requires a willingness to enter the unknown, where the mind has no script to follow. And yet it is in this very uncertainty that the sacred voice emerges. It doesn't speak to your mask, it speaks to your soul. The more you rest in your true identity, as the silent witness, as the field of being, the more clearly you begin to hear the guidance that was always there, waiting for the static of self, definition to fall away. Emotions are not just feelings, they are frequencies. Each emotion carries a specific vibrational signature that influences the electromagnetic field of the body and the signal you send into the quantum field. Low-frequency emotions like fear, guilt, shame, and anger create incoherence in the heart and brain. This incoherence disrupts your inner harmony and disconnects you from the subtle realms of intuition and divine intelligence. These emotional states narrow your focus, bind your awareness to survival mode, and keep your attention locked into the material world. In contrast, elevated emotions such as love, gratitude, compassion, and joy create coherence. When the heart enters a state of coherence, it sends a harmonious signal to the brain, which then begins to function in greater order and balance. This synchronized state amplifies your ability to perceive and connect with non-physical dimensions of intelligence. You're no longer entangled in the static of separation. Instead, you begin to resonate with the field of unity. This shift in vibration isn't metaphorical, it's physiological and energetic. The higher the frequency you sustain, the clearer the connection becomes. Tuning to divine intelligence means learning to dwell in these elevated states, not as temporary emotions but as enduring traits of being. Gratitude, for instance, is more than a reaction to something good. It is a generative energy that aligns you with abundance before it manifests. Love is not just an emotion toward another, it is the frequency of oneness, the signature of the Creator. When you embody these high vibrational states consistently, you become a vibrational match to the guidance, wisdom, and insight that already exist in the field. You don't force divine communication, you magnetize it. Your emotional state is not just a reaction to life. It is the tuning mechanism for the type of life and guidance you receive. The voice of God is not always something that arrives in the form of language. It does not necessarily sound like a voice in the way we think of speech. More often, it comes through intuition, a deep, immediate knowing that bypasses logic and arrives fully formed. This knowing doesn't need explanation or validation. It simply resonates as truth. When you begin to operate from a more coherent, receptive state, these intuitive insights become more frequent, more clear, and more trustworthy. The divine speaks fluently in the language of energy, symbols, feelings, and inner recognition. Intuition is not imagination or fantasy. It is perception without the filter of the rational mind. It arises from a deeper intelligence that exists beyond your conscious thinking. This inner knowing may come as a sudden idea that feels completely aligned, a quiet urge to move in a certain direction, or an unshakable sense that something is right or wrong, even when there is no logical reason for it. The more you quiet the mind and live in coherence, the easier it becomes to discern this voice from the noise of mental chatter or emotional reactivity. This kind of communication doesn't always arrive when you ask for it. It often shows up in moments of stillness, openness, or surrender. It might speak through a dream, a spontaneous insight, or a synchronicity so precise that it feels orchestrated by something greater. The key is learning to trust that these moments are not coincidences. They are responses to the signal you are emitting. The voice of God moves through the field as vibration and meets you at the level of your awareness. It is not always loud, but it is always available to the one who knows how to listen beyond words and recognize the subtle language of the soul. Listening, in the spiritual sense, has very little to do with the ears. True listening happens through presence, through a heightened state of awareness where the body is still, the mind is quiet, and the attention is fully anchored in the now. The physical ears may not detect anything unusual, but something deeper begins to perceive. This form of listening is not passive. It's an active state of consciousness where you become attuned to subtle energies, impressions, and internal shifts. It is the kind of listening that requires your entire being to participate, not just your sense of hearing. The voice of divine intelligence doesn't always take the form of audible words. Sometimes it arrives as an expansion in the chest, a sudden lightness in the body, a feeling of alignment so strong that it overrides fear or doubt. These are not random sensations. They are signals. The more attuned you become to the nuances of your own inner world, the more you can detect the difference between noise and knowing. This level of sensitivity doesn't come from effort. It arises naturally when you learn how to be deeply still and fully present. Listening through awareness means you stop trying to interpret or control what's coming. You stop filling the silence with your own desires, questions, or expectations. Instead, you enter a space of deep receptivity where truth can simply arise. Sometimes it comes through the tone of someone's voice, the energy of a space, or the timing of an event. Sometimes it emerges from within as clarity that feels like it belongs to a greater mind than your own. When you listen beyond the ears, you begin to experience communication as a full body, full being awareness. You don't just hear guidance. You feel it as reality moving through you in real time. Trusting inner resonance is one of the most crucial steps in hearing the divine voice clearly. When you begin to attune to the subtle whispers of intuition and inner knowing, the next challenge is to trust them, not just occasionally but consistently. This is where many falter. The rational mind, conditioned by years of external validation and logical reasoning, often casts doubt on what cannot be explained or seen. But the truth is, divine guidance rarely arrives in ways that fit neatly into our logical frameworks. It is often a quiet, gentle nudge or a knowing that feels true without a clear explanation. Trusting these subtle impressions requires a deep surrender to the unseen forces at play in your life. It means letting go of the need to control every outcome or to have a step-by-step plan. Trusting divine guidance is not about asking for signs on demand or waiting for a clear voice to appear. It is about learning to discern the moments when something feels right or aligned, even in the absence of evidence. It's a deep inner feeling that you're on the right path and that the universe or God is guiding you, even if you can't see the whole picture yet. When you begin to trust these inner signals, you enter into a dynamic relationship with the divine. You stop second-guessing yourself or doubting the clarity that arises. Each act of trust strengthens your connection and builds your confidence in listening to the voice of God. As you grow in this practice, you will find that the guidance becomes clearer, more frequent, and easier to follow. What begins as a whisper will grow into a powerful, guiding force that leads you to deeper alignment and greater peace. When you begin to hear and trust the voice of God, you aren't simply receiving guidance. You are becoming a vessel through which that guidance flows. The voice of divine intelligence doesn't come solely for your benefit. It's meant to be channeled into action, into life, into the world. As you align more deeply with this intelligence, you move from being a passive receiver to an active participant in the unfolding of something greater than yourself. This shift in role is transformative, as it changes your identity from that of an individual seeking answers to one who embodies divine purpose. When you act on the insights and wisdom that come from this higher place, you don't just create alignment in your life. You begin to reflect that alignment into the world around you. This is how you become a channel for divine intelligence. By allowing it to flow through your choices, your words, your actions, and your energy, it no longer feels like you are trying to force outcomes or make things happen. Instead, you begin to live in a state of grace, where things unfold naturally, synchronistically, and often effortlessly. As you deepen your connection to the divine voice within, the external world begins to mirror your internal alignment. What you attract into your life reflects the frequency you emit. You begin to see opportunities, people, and circumstances aligning in ways that seem to come from a higher intelligence, not from your personal effort. The more you become a vessel for this flow, the more the divine voice becomes integrated into every aspect of your existence. It moves through your work, your relationships, your health, and your decisions, leading you to become an active participant in the greater divine plan.